How are you guys doing? Today is Friday, December 31st, 2021. And for this final episode of the Elite Collection for 2021 for the calendar year, I'm going to take this episode to preview for the 2022 year who are the elite football players, even as we're in the midst of a football season right now. So it's gotten a little hectic, but I'll make sure that for the next season and at least for college football, you'll at least know what to look for, even going into the playoffs for January and February. And here's how I have them set up. And of course, before I go into every single one, I think it's worth noting that at least in America, football really reigns supreme, meaning that there's still hundreds of thousands of people in the United States that are competing for these very few, very limited NFL slots. And of course, as the NFL is getting a lot harder, it's getting a lot tougher to make those spots. And the fact that these are the players that sit at the very top and they are the cream of the crop, I think it's worth mentioning that these players are elite, and not only just mentioning that they're elite. Throughout the year, I'm going to drop elite individual profiles and even greatest of all time individual profiles for each and every single one of these players, as if once their birthday passes, or at least on that day, just to give a sense of what they've done in their career up until that day. For a lot of the players that are here later in the year, I've actually done most of these players in 2021. I've only added about 6-7 players. So a vast majority of these players have a 2021 profile. So if you are waiting to see what's going on with those players, I do have those up and available. But with that said, I'm going to get into the players going into 2022 who we can establish as elite going in. So as of this date, the reigning Super Bowl champions are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The only two players that are representing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are their goated starting quarterback, Tom Brady, and Mike Evans, their wide receiver. Tom Brady's a 7-time Super Bowl champ. I don't have to go into anything really about him, but Tom Brady turns 45 before before the 2022 NFL season, and it looks as though he's going to keep playing in the NFL, considering he has MVP votes this year. And then of course Mike Evans is going to turn 29 right before this upcoming season too, and not to they are fresh off of a Super Bowl, and Mike Evans and Tom Brady were very strong remnants of a very strong Super Bowl team. Staying within that division, moving to the New Orleans Saints. On the offensive side, their running back Alvin Kamara turns 27 this year before the 2022 season. As Alvin Kamara, with Drew Brees and with Taysom Hill and with other quarterbacks in the Saints system, to still establish himself as a dual threat in the running game and in the passing game. And Mike Thomas is coming off of a couple of injury seasons in a row right after he broke the NFL record for receptions in a season. He still currently holds that record. And on the defensive side, starting on the defensive line, their defensive end Cameron Jordan, their multiple-time Pro Bowler, turns 33 in the summer. And then their cornerback, Marshawn Lattimore, out of Ohio State, I want to say, after putting together amazing seasons with the Saints since he's gotten there, he turns 26 in May. Jumping to Atlanta, the Falcons, of course, they're only represented by their young tight end, Kyle Pitts. At 21, he is as a rookie to make the Pro Bowl in that season and almost finish with 1,000 yards. That's an incredible pace to set, not to mention that he was the highest drafted tight end in NFL history. So even if I am possibly jumping the gun, I do think that Kyle Pitts may very well be a very sure thing for the Atlanta Falcons. Looking at the Panthers, the only two players I have representing the Panthers are their running back, Christian McCaffrey, and their cornerback, Stephon Gilmore. Christian McCaffrey's last full season in the NFL was a year in which he almost won the MVP. He was responsible for most of Carolina's offense. And then on the defensive end, Stephon Gilmore has won a Defensive Player of the Year very recently. And since he's been on the Panthers, he hasn't really fallen that far off from that level. Moving around the NFC as we go to the East, representing the Dallas Cowboys. First, on the offense, I have their wide receiver, Amari Cooper, out of Alabama, who has been a consistent 1,000-yard threat, especially with Dak Prescott throwing to him, and the Cowboys have been a different team since Dak Prescott got Amari Cooper in his wings. On the defensive side, they're led by their young bucks, their linebacker, Micah Parsons, out of Penn State, who already has double-digit sacks in his rookie year, and Trayvon Diggs, who has not only just double-digit interceptions, but leads the league in interceptions this early in his career. Amari Cooper turns 28 this year, already said. Micah Parsons turns 23 in May. And then Trayvon Diggs turns 24 next or all the way in September, just to get a sense of how young these Cowboys are. The only player representing the Washington football team in this list is Chase Young, their young defensive end, who I believe was named the Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. This season, he's still putting up great numbers, as Washington has really kind of been struggling this year. Chase Young turns 23 in April. Looking out to see what's going on, or looking to see who's representing the Eagles. First, on the offensive side, the only player representing their offense is Devontae Smith, their 23-year-old wide receiver who won the Heisman in 2021, has still made a very solid impression with the Eagles. I believe his very first reception in the NFL was a touchdown. So, of course, great start to what he's been doing, and I don't think he's shown any signs of slowing up. On the defensive side of the ball, starting on the line, their tackle Fletcher Cox, their multiple-time Pro Bowler, is of course making this list after being such a consistent force. And of course, in their secondary, Darius Slay has made himself a home in Philly after being one of the better defensive ends in Detroit for a lot of his career. And of course, Darius Slay turns 31 tomorrow, as he's the only New Year's birthday on my list out of all the athletes. So that's who I have with the Eagles. And of course, with no one really representing the Giants, that really takes care of the NFC East. Looking at the NFC North, starting with the Green Bay Packers, they are led, of course, by their goated starting quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who turns 39 in December. Of course, I can say what I want about Aaron Rodgers, but he's a multiple-time MVP. He's the reigning MVP of the league, actually. And he very well could win the MVP this year, as well, as the Packers are running like a well-oiled machine. And, of course, a big part of that is his running back and his wide receiver. Aaron Jones turns 28 in September, the same day as Aaron Rodgers, actually, as Aaron Jones is quite a dual threat at the running back position. And, of course, on December 24th, on New Year's Eve of 2022, Davante Adams will turn 30, and he's been a player that's been a consistent Pro Bowler over the last 5 seasons with Green Bay. On the defensive side, the only player representing them is Za'Darius Smith, their linebacker, a player who's consistently put up double-digit sacks in his seasons. But of course, that's how the Packers are really looking really dominant on offense, and they still have Za'Darius Smith and a really strong defense. Looking at the players representing the Chicago Bears, first on offense is Justin Fields, their young 22-year-old who has officially earned his way into the starting lineup in his rookie season for the Chicago Bears. He's had some meh games, but at the same time, he's still getting accustomed to NFL speed, and it looks as though he's actually picking it up a lot quicker than a lot of people would give him credit for. And then on the defensive end, you have Khalil Mack, who turns 31 in February, and not to mention that Khalil Mack is a walking Defensive Player of the Year candidate whenever he plays. He definitely is, even though he's 30 right now and is turning 31 soon, he is definitely a player that has shown that he is one of the more formidable defensive forces in all of football. Looking at the players representing the Minnesota Vikings, starting first on the offensive side, their running back Dalvin Cook turns 26 in August. Dalvin Cook has had incredible rushing seasons whenever he wasn't hurt, and I'm glad to say that he's on this list again. Their wide receiver Justin Jefferson, their second-year receiver, is of course having an amazing second year as he's starting to establish himself as one of the better young wide receivers in the league. He turns 23 in June. On the defensive side of the ball, on the line, Danielle Hunter has 27, or he turns 28 towards the end of October, as he's been a very consistent force on that Minnesota Vikings line, getting double-digit sacks. And then in the secondary, representing them is Harrison Smith, their multiple-time Pro Bowler and all NFL safety. He's very tough to be that dominant, especially a safety, and he is a big part of the reason why the Minnesota Vikings defense and Danielle Hunter, they're big parts of the reasons why the Minnesota Vikings defenses have been so dominant over the past few years. And then, of course, to rounding out that division, the Lions don't really have anyone representing them. So, with that said, I'm going to jump out to the NFC West, starting with the Rams on the offense. They're, of course, led by their wide receiver Cooper Kupp, the only offensive player I actually have on here. This season, it's very possible that he could break the receiving yards record as he leads the league in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. He might lead it in receptions, but don't take my word for receptions as seriously as my yards and touchdowns. That I'm sure about. On the defensive side of the ball, they're led by their go-to defensive tackle, Aaron Donald. He turns 31 in May. Aaron Donald is a defensive tackle that consistently gets double-digit sacks, and there's nothing that most NFL offensive lines have been able to do to stop him. So, of course, good luck. Also on that line is Von Miller out of Texas A&M, the multiple-time All-Pro selection and the multiple-time Pro Bowler. Turns 33 in March as he's showing with the Rams. He's proving to be a very helpful addition to this line that's already formidable and very well could lead the Rams to the Super Bowl. And then in their secondary, they have Jalen Ramsey, who is, of course, regarded as one of the best, if not the best, cornerback in all of football. He turns 28 this year. Of course, as no one's even throwing it his way. And, of course, the fact that you have Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, and Von Miller on your defense proves that you're going to have to do a lot in the playoffs to outscore this LA Rams team, especially considering they have the leading wide receiver in the NFL statistically by a wide margin, by a wider margin than you'd expect. And then looking next at the Seattle Seahawks, they're led by their elite starting quarterback, Russell Wilson, out of North Carolina State and Wisconsin. He turns 34 in November, and he is the 2020 Walter Payton Man of the Year. And this season, he's not particularly performing the way many would expect him to. And of course, he was hurt for a good chunk of the year too. I still think that going into 2022, he's still one of the best long ball passers in all of football, and just medium range and short range as well. And I think that he'll get it right back together. This season was a bit of a down year for him. Staying on that offense, their wide receiver DK Metcalf turns 25 in December. Understanding the frame that he possesses, understanding that he has Russell Wilson, and the fact that he actually is an elite wide receiver when he puts everything together I think it paints a good picture for why I still have DK Metcalf on here, especially after his really impressive 2020 season. On the defensive side, they're led by, of course, Bobby Wagner, who, since Luke Kuechly has retired, has been universally regarded as the best linebacker. Or not universally, because he's still competing with Darius Leonard, but he's definitely been the most dominant linebacker over the past half decade, and now I'd argue even more. And also in that secondary, on that defense, they have Jamal Adams lining up at safety, as Jamal Adams has been one of the better tackling and coverage, even sacked safeties in history. I believe he has the most sacks by a defensive back in an NFL season, if I'm not mistaken. Taking a look at the players representing San Francisco, their tight end George Kittle is the only offensive player for the 49ers as he turns 29 in October. George Kittle, of course, is coming off a multiple all-pro seasons where not only is he just one of the best receiving tight ends in football, he does block, and he does do what he does what the 49ers basically ask him to do, and he does it better than most people that play his position. On the defensive end, Nick Bosa turns 25 in October. Nick Bosa making it here after showing that even in the very few games that he's been in, that the 49ers defense is a very formidable force as long as that one Nick Bosa is on there, is on the field at that one time. Even if he creates distractions, even if he draws the double teams, even if he actually gets the double-digit sacks himself, Nick Bosa is, I don't want to say single-handedly changing this 49ers offense, but he is, or this 49ers defense, but I do want to say that he is very impactful. I would say more impactful than a lot of defensive players on their teams. He even has 15 sacks in 15 games, so I wouldn't even argue with that aspect of it either. Looking at the players representing the Arizona Cardinals on the offensive side, their quarterback Kyler Murray turns 25 in August. The only player that has been taken in the first round of the MLB and the NFL drafts, had an incredible start to this season before the Cardinals fell off a bit. But of course, Kyler Murray, in the games that he's played in the NFL, has shown that he is an elite quarterback that is definitely here to stay. And then also on the offensive side, their wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, who's been one of the best wide receivers for the past half decade, he turns 30 in the middle of June. On the defensive side of the ball, Chandler Jones, who consistently gets a ridiculous amount of tackles every year, he turns 32 in February. And then looking at the Cardinals secondary, they are of course covered by Budda Baker, who secondary, who just like pass coverage wise and tackling wise is one of the more well-rounded safeties, and a safety that most definitely had to prove himself to make it at least past that at least elite threshold in the first place. So those are the players that are, of course, representing the NFC. And then, of course, representing the AFC on the other side, starting with the reigning AFC champs. The Kansas City Chiefs are led by their starting quarterback, the $500 million man, Patrick Mahomes, who's already won an MVP and a Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes turns 27 in September, just to give a sense of how young he is. Tom Brady is 44. Like, that's an 18-year age difference. They're playing in the same league. On also staying within their offense, their tight end Travis Kelce, who I would argue is uniformly the best, but of course it's a two-man race for the best tight end in football between Travis Kelce and George Kittle. He's I believe he has the most reception yards by a tight end in NFL history. Not to mention that he's also putting a ridiculous amount of touchdowns up, as well as he and Patrick Mahomes have their own little telecommunication going on. Also on the outside, they're led by Tyreek Hill, who is known as the fastest man in all of football. He's also been an all-pro player every single year that he's been in the league. Tyreek Hill turns 28 in March. On the defensive side of the ball, the Chiefs are led by their defensive tackle Chris Jones. He turns 28 in July, as he has been one of the consistent performers for the Kansas City Chiefs since they've been a title contender. And then, of course, manning the backfield is Tyrann Mathieu, who has established himself on and off as one of the best at a very tough position to be the best at, especially if you're a safety in this league. And he is a very big part of the reason that the Chiefs have made it to the last two Super Bowls. And I'm not going to take any credit away from Tyrann Mathieu. Staying within this division, moving on to Las Vegas, the only player that I have representing the Raiders is their running back, Josh Jacobs. He turns 24 in February. And just to get a sense of the player that he's been, he was a 1,000-yard rusher as a rookie. His second year wasn't necessarily what you expect, but I still think that he is a definite weapon in that system, especially as a dual threat. I think that even if Josh Jacobs has maybe a slight hiccup, once the Raiders' offense is revving, their offense is going to be revving through Josh Jacobs. And then, of course, moving on to Los Angeles within this division, the Los Angeles Chargers are led by their young elite starting quarterback, Justin Herbert, who was the Offensive Rookie of the Year from the 2020 NFL season. And this second year, I would argue he's gotten a lot better. And then on the offensive side, still, their wide receiver, Keenan Allen, who's consistently amongst the leading receivers every single year since he's been in almost every year since he's been in the league. He turns 30 in April. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, their defensive end, Joey Bosa, out of Ohio State, is having an amazing season this year. He turns 27 in July. Derwin James turns 26 in April, as Derwin James has had an amazing season this year, as this has been one of the full seasons in which Derwin James has not been seriously hurt for like half the year. And then looking at the last season, or looking at the last team in this conference, the Broncos don't necessarily have any of those players, but I guess that moves me on to the AFC North. The lone player representing the Cincinnati Bengals is Ja'Marr Chase, their 21-year-old wide receiver who already has 1,000 yards this season. He has had an amazing game, as Joe Burrow has also kind of grown in his own way as well. Ja'Marr Chase may very well go on to be a Pro Bowler I believe he was already named a Pro Bowler in his rookie season. So, of course, congratulations to Ja'Marr Chase for accomplishing that, especially in a division that's run by defense. Moving to the Ravens, they're, of course, led by their elite starting quarterback, Lamar Jackson, out of Louisville. The reigning Heisman winner is also the NFL's youngest all-time MVP. And he would go on to make a Pro Bowl again this year. He turns 25 in a week. Moving to the defensive side, their defensive end, Calais Campbell, would go on to be named or I guess he'll turn 36 in September, as Calais Campbell, the 6'6" giant, is still able to use his size, especially at his old age, to his advantage. And he's been incredibly good at making sure he's been able to do so. And also staying on that defense, moving to their secondary, their corners, Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey. I both have them on here, as Marcus Peters turns 29 this year and on the 9th, and Marlon Humphrey turns 26 in July. Marcus Peters has not been playing, but Marlon Humphrey has, kind of by himself. He hasn't really had one of those seasons that you'd really expect, but he's still one of the lockdown corners of the NFL since he's been here. And of course, like I said, Marcus Peters didn't even play at all in this 2021 season. So that's the Bengals. Moving to the Steelers, the players representing them are all on defense, starting with their defensive tackle, Cameron Hayward. They're consistent all-pro and Pro Bowl defensive lineman. Of course, he turns 33 in May. Their outside linebacker, TJ Watt, who of course is competing for the sack title for 2021. He will turn 28 in October. And then in November, Minkah Fitzpatrick, their safety, will turn 26, as Minkah Fitzpatrick has been a big reason why the Steelers have been a playoff team ever since he moved to the Steelers from the Miami Dolphins. And then last but not least, looking at the players representing the Cleveland Browns, starting on the offensive side, their running back Nick Chubb has he's established himself as possibly the second best running back in football, or at least rushing running back that isn't Derrick Henry, and at least he even has Jonathan Taylor as his competition. But Nick Chubb has been an amazing running back when he's been completely healthy, and he is the Cleveland Browns offense does not do what the Cleveland Browns offense does without Nick Chubb running things. On the defensive line, Myles Garrett is of course another player that is up for Defensive Player of the Year this year, as he turns 27 on December 29th. As in, he turned 26 not that long ago. And then looking at their secondary, Denzel Ward turns 25 in April, as he has been one of the lockdown corners that the Cleveland Browns have definitely needed that they've definitely needed, and he's definitely shown up and done what he was expected to do, as he's been everything as advertised out of Ohio State. Looking at the teams representing the AFC East, considering there's no teams from the Jets, moving on to the Dolphins. The two players that I have representing the Miami Dolphins are their quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, and I have Xavier Howard at corner. I have Tua Tagovailoa. This may be one of the more controversial ones, but my thing with Tua is that he came into the league as a prominent prospect out of college, and I had him since. His rookie season, he would go on to earn his way into the starting lineup, and even this season, he's done a remarkable job. He even leads the league in completion percentage at 23 years old for a Miami Dolphins team that very well could make the playoffs this year, that has no business even being there. And then on the defensive side, you have Xavier Howard, their corner, who's led the league in interceptions multiple times. He turns 29 in July, so that's why those are the two players that I have representing the Dolphins. Moving to the Patriots, I have one player representing the New England Patriots is their 29-year-old linebacker, Matthew Judon, after Judon has been named a Pro Bowler for the third season in a row, and he's still establishing that he's one of the consistent defensive end sack makers, or I guess sack takers. I guess you take a sack, huh? And then last but not least, moving to the Buffalo Bills, who won this division last year. They're led by their elite starting quarterback, Josh Allen, who is in MVP conversations now. He turns 26 in May, as he has been one of the many reasons that the Buffalo Bills have been a very complete team all the way around on offense and defense. Also in their offense, their wide receiver, Stephon Diggs, turns 29. In 2020, he led the NFL in receptions and receiving yards. And not to mention that even this year, he's still putting up incredible numbers as well. On the defensive side of the ball, they're led by their young linebacker, Tremaine Edmunds, who turns 24 this year and who's been a captain on the team. This is his third season as one of the team captains on the defensive end, considering how young he is at the position, which is why I give Tremaine Edmunds his flowers. I give this man his credit. And then at corner, of course, you have Tre'Davious White, who's definitely, I don't know if he's quietly, I would say he's quietly established himself as one of the league's handful of lockdown corners in football. He turns 27 on January 16th. And of course, moving to the AFC South, moving to the team that's really kind of that's really kind of sitting at the top of that division. It's the Titans, and the only player representing the Titans is Derrick Henry, their elite running back who had 2,000 rushing yards last year. So of course, he had a great season. And right before he got hurt, he was the leader he was the leader in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns by a wide margin. He even had more yards after his first touch than most running backs in all of football, to give you a sense of how strong, powerful, dominant, and just dynamic Derrick Henry is as a player for the Tennessee Titans. Representing the Jacksonville Jaguars was their starting quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. He turns 23 in October, and their running back, James Robinson, who's 23, who went undrafted. Because of the entire Urban Meyer toxic coaching situation, these are players that I had as a league going into this year. And I feel like I couldn't really take them off because I don't know how much of the Jaguars' lack of success was really on them versus just terrible play calling. I mean, James Robinson did get benched by a former Ohio State coach for a former Ohio State player, because that did happen. And even in the carries that he did get, he still would he would still have incredible games like this season when they actually let him play. And then of course Trevor Lawrence would not have the start that many expected. And of course he does play for the Jaguars, so of course that will probably take some time to set up a offensive line in front of him. But that's how the Jaguars are setting up. And of course, with no one representing the Texans, the last team that's left are the Indianapolis Colts. And then I'm going to start with the player that many people think is going to run away with the Offensive Player of the Year, pun intended, Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is 22 as he turns 23 on the 19th of January, very soon. He is putting up an incredible season where he's had over 1,500 yards rushing in just this season alone. He very well could establish himself as one of the better young running backs, or one of the better running backs just in the history of the game. And considering the pace that he's at right now, I think he can be very amazing. He's already one of the best football players right now. And then on the defensive end, the Colts have the best linebacker in the AFC, being Darius Leonard. He turns 27 in July, just to get a better sense. And of course, expect him to be near the top of the tackles list leaders every year, including this one. With that said, those are all of the elite football players for as we prepare for this 2022 football season. And of course, I do hope on changing and moving around a lot of these players at the end of every single year. But with this said, I do think that these players are definitely worth writing profiles about. And once I get to their birthdays, I will make those profiles specifically on those days. And for a good amount of these players, except for maybe like 6 or 7, there should be episodes already up for the 2021 year, but that's just everything that they've done up until that birthday. But it should still give you a good hint of the picture of what kind of players they are. And that leads me to finish off by saying, thank you once again for listening to this entire 2021 reel. I was actually building this reel so that I could actually get a show of my own. I covered 4 sports for the entirety of a year, 365 days. Thank goodness it wasn't a leap year. And I want to thank everyone for listening, and I really hope all is well. And I will catch you with more tomorrow in the new year. Have an amazing 2022. Peace out, 2021.